Hello YouTube, this is Python Blue. This time around, I felt it best to do my reviews of synthesizers through videos as opposed to mere text. That being said, to start off this set of videos, I'm going to be reviewing what's currently the oldest synthesizer I have at this time, the Oberheim DPX-1. The Oberheim DPX was definitely an interesting precedent for Oberheim, and for the synthesizer world in general. For the first time, people were able to play samples from various samplers at a fraction of the price, all in a rack mount module. In addition, this was also one of the first samplers of sorts to implement MIDI with an add-on for MIDI known as MIDI Sample Dump Standard, which would allow you to essentially transport the samples over to other samplers that support it. Unfortunately, the DPX-1 was not really a huge success, even despite in many ways it's considered the rack of the emulator 2. This was partially because of the fact that the aforementioned MIDI sample dump standard is awfully slow when it performs successfully, meaning that it would take at least a few minutes to transport a very small recording. So now we carry on to my personal thoughts and experience with this module. What this module is capable of doing is playing samples from the emulator 2, the Prophet 2000, the Ensoniq Mirage, and, as of later revisions, the Akai S900. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using samples I have from the Prophet 2000, this one being focused on heavy metal guitars. So we load that into the first drive, due to its size. The other drive is reserved strictly for emulator 2 samples. Now we turn on the machine. Unfortunately, the power switch is inconveniently located in the back. It takes a few minutes, sadly. So now we have successfully loaded a floppy disk into the Oberheim DPX-1. As you can see, the display has changed to 2 zeros, and the light next to it is on patch select. This means that we are in patch mode for the DPX-1 and can now fiddle with it, as I will do momentarily. Not terribly convincing samples, but that was the mid-80s for you. Essentially, this mode is also the most important, but I will briefly talk about the other modes as well. MIDI channel indicates whether MIDI is working, and if so, which channel it's sending to. This also means that it has very basic multi-mode. Fine-tuning is a bit misleading. It can apply either to the tuning, which is represented here by pitch, or filter cutoff. Data dump is where you dump your contents, either to or from the machine, through MIDI sample dump or through floppy disks. The MIDI controller menu represents how input is received within the Oberheim DPX system, and extended functions are basically everything else that is necessary for the system, such as formatting floppy disks, shown here. My personal experience is that it's, from the position of a musician who is very much into earlier music, it can be pretty interesting knowing how floppy disks worked for synthesizers and samplers. Because let's face it, CDs did not always exist, nor did DVDs. My only gripes with this machine, other than likely things that are problems with the actual unit, such as MIDI sample dump standard not working, would be its limited features, which in many ways were understandable for the time. For instance, it only has one mono output within all systems. Additional outputs were only an option, as was a CD drive, which were necessary to read some emulator 2 samples. If you didn't have that option, you'd otherwise have to stick to the 5¼ inch drive instead of the 3½ inch drive for floppy disks. But overall, this is still a very great machine, and I hope that should others acquire it, they come to enjoy it as well. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.